Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. I guess I'm just back to calling it that instead of just video game news or Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel and video game news. I should say both, but whatever. Starting a little bit earlier, still not back to the 10 a.m. Noon streams. I did log in yesterday and managed to get the daily login and the spectate. Didn't do anything else. Since the new season has started, all we have to do after spectating is lost my train of thought already. All we have to do is play ranked. Yeah, I logged in on my phone and it had a slightly different advertisements and made me think there might be a new pack, but there isn't a new pack. This was the newest thing that was added, and it looks like it would be 20 days until we get any new normal packs, and that'll be the point to consider maybe opening at least 10 packs of whatever's new as far as selection packs go. But selection packs are not expansion packs, so there's still that question in the air as far as how is Yu-Gi-Oh! Going to really go as far as adding cards, or how long is it going to take Master Duel to start adding cards. For the accountability section, I've been watching way too much Netflix, and but I did manage to get a couple of recordings of the story mode of Shadowverse. It's been pretty awful though. Like one subchapter in Shadowverse had a ton of just internal dialogue that wasn't voiced, and then the next subchapter did have some internal dialogue that was voiced, but then the next subchapter just kind of proves itself to be completely useless as a chapter because it doesn't give you really any kind of resolution or anything, and none of them really do. The first three subchapters felt like they were giving you the good ending of multiple time loops at the end, and then the fourth one gives you kind of a non-ending of multiple time loops, which just feels like they're just jerking me around and wasting my time. Also had a brief moment where I couldn't find my Raspberry Pi Zeros. I've poorly organized as far as where I put them, but eventually I found them because I was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure I have at least a couple. Yeah, I'm looking into this weird thing called USB gadget mode or Raspberry Pi gadget mode. In Linux, apparently there is a way just programmed into kernel modules to turn the USB connection from being just a standard USB connection that you would expect into things like a keyboard or a mouse or USB mass storage, things like that, although I hear mass storage is pretty difficult. So on the Raspberry Pi you still would have like Raspbian Linux installed, but when you plug this device into a PC, it sees it as a keyboard instead. And I thought that was something that had to require a USB host, but apparently it doesn't. it doesn't seem like, though, these Linux modules work for just everything out of the box. There is a list of chipsets you have to have, but the list is bigger than one or two. And so I was gonna play around with that and see what I could do with making a Python program that could send out some text via keyboard when plugged into a computer. And so I was starting to think about yet another side project instead of being a YouTuber and just making more content, which at the end of the day I do need to probably, what I realized late last night is probably what I need to do is do a thing of Shadowverse and then just play a different game. Like, there's nothing wrong with doing something that is a little frustrating, but you need to get it done just to wrap up Shadowverse, and because I really don't feel like it's fair to just arbitrarily rage quit on that story yet. Although Shadowverse did add more content in the solo story, but they've only partially added a single character out of 3 in the next chapter, and it's probably only half of that new character's story, so I'm not going to sit around and wait the months that it could possibly take to get all 3 characters to move the story forward. Where I wanted to end it ends on a very good to be continued screen, which is kind of just like the perfect place for me to end it. But there's nothing wrong with doing something that's slightly frustrating and then taking a break, and then after like 30 minutes doing something that's much more interesting. There is always this danger, I have to admit, that it feels like it definitely feels like I get more frustrated with games than I probably should. Like, there's definitely a point to that. Also, that whole Portal mini game to show off the Steam Deck came out yesterday, and I was completely not paying attention, so I didn't stream it. I will probably play it and just pre-record it, but I don't know if I'm gonna specifically have any reason to like just throw it out there as an extra video. That there aren't extra time slots, and there isn't a great way to bump something. That is something that YouTube's many limitations as far as having videos doesn't really address. Like, it would be a nightmare scenario to try and bump everything and delay it. Or to try and build in buffers so that you could put something in there. Alright, set that. So I figured out but have not fixed what was wrong with the Video Games Chronicles program, and I'm happy to say it's not my fault. What they've done, well, it is my fault. At the end of the day, I programmed it. If I didn't program for every possible scenario, then I didn't have the foresight. Even if I couldn't have had the foresight. We need to end here. But what they've done is they have favorited and saved this bit of text at the top of every single page when going down their news. So what I need to do, since I am using the articles Let's see. Since I'm using I was using the first article as a favorite, then as an anchor to say, have we seen this article before or not? Because we have seen this Destiny 2 article before. We can make an assumption here and anchor off the second one. Or we could make a special exception to ignore the first one. There is a danger here. What if they favorited two things? Or what if they never unfavorited things, or they did unfavored things? There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 per page regardless. So, yeah. Let's go ahead and just destroy one card on the field. That didn't work. Which pretty much tells me I think that this wouldn't have worked either, which is fine, because then that tells me I could still win here by just attacking. Remember, we really do want to win. So what I kind of would need to do is I guess the right thing to do would be, this has this little flag here. I bet this WordPress plugin has a flag favorite icon anyways. So we could look for that and have an if statement for that. Or, you know, this has a date. It would probably make more sense to simply look for the date. Like, just see if this date can be converted into the same text. And, like, yeah, I guess that would probably be the best way to do it. Is don't anchor on the links, anchor on the date. Because that's the part that won't get changed or won't lie as likely. Or isn't as likely to lie. So that's something they'll have to work on, I suppose. Okay. Let's see if this works. Special summoning this. You know what, actually, can we can't do anything anyways. It wouldn't have mattered anyways. I needed to have, at some point I could change this to an 8-star, and by changing that to an 8-star I could maybe use it as a tribute, but I don't think we're gonna get that far anyway, so I don't think it matters. Alright, so moving along in the news, there's no reason to go long here. I still have plenty of things to work on, and am forever falling further and further behind. According to Video Games Chronicle, spending on console hardware. By the way, I just opened these tabs manually for the time being. Spending on console hardware and games reached a record high in 2021. It's estimated that $60 billion was spent on consoles, games, and services last year. Which, yeah, okay. That's believable. People being stuck in their house. So we could activate this, we can make this 8, and we really couldn't do anything else with it though. So I may lose here just because I can't get anything to the field. Video Games Chronicle says Amazon's streaming platform Luna has fully launched in the US with free Prime games. Prime members will receive free games to stream, rotating monthly. Which, frankly, I've not heard word too about Luna since it probably was first announced. You can see here you have what I assume is something like an Amazon Fire Stick and a controller in the layout of the Xbox 360 layout, with the D-pad at the bottom. And then you have more of a media remote that is not too different from like a Roku remote. So it seems like it is several different things. Several different target audiences that they're trying to reach in one device, and yeah, it very well may be too little too late to, like, with Amazon Prime being somewhere around $120 a year to $140 a year, and having to have the internet to do the Luna part, which is going to easily be another let's be more honest here, $400 or $500 a year for the internet service. Not all of that, of course, is going to just go to Luna, but if you have to update from a slower internet to a faster internet, that's going to be an extra cost that becomes obvious to you. And having no portability compared to the Steam Deck or the Switch, and having really no exclusive games at all, except for Amazon games, which would be maybe one game of some note at most. This really doesn't feel like a service that too many people would even consider or know about, let alone really choose to take and use as an offer. I think game streaming as a service is, like a lot of new ideas and new products, is going to try and sell itself as this high-end premium product that's going to be very overpriced, and then quickly the market is going to decide, if the market truly does decide, that something like Luna should be free with Prime and a value add. And arguably, I think a lot of people probably are starting to feel the sentiment that Amazon Prime as a service should be cheaper, not more expensive, and that the money going to Amazon Prime should not be just funding more and more pointless side ventures. Because the only real values with Prime are either artificial value adds in things that shouldn't be included with Prime and should just be free anyways, or free shipping, That's like all I think most people cared about with Prime was free shipping, and it's pretty easy to get free shipping anyways. There's also, I suppose, a slight value in Prime Video, but they don't even do a great job with Prime Video. I was just looking at it yesterday, and just compared to Netflix being able to acquire a bunch of junk, the numbers are just so much better on Netflix compared to Prime Video as far as, hey, we've got 5 new things this week to watch on Netflix, and Prime Video's got maybe 1 new thing, maybe nothing new as far as an exclusive or something that they've got to show. And Netflix has like Stranger Things at least as a major success, where Prime Video has maybe The Boys, and that's it. Like, so yeah, it's really hard to think that Luna or Stadia or any of these streaming services are going to make any sense. They would have made sense 5-10 years ago, back when it would have been probably technologically impossible to do it, but like our internet in the United States in particular is not getting better to a level where it would make sense that they could do like ray tracing and 4K streaming and do something better than what a console could do, or even a fairly cheap PC could do. Even with the video card shortages, I don't think Luna and Stadia and streaming services like that make up for that problem. Moving on, Back 4 Blood's first major DLC is revealed as it hits 10 million players. This is the first time I've heard anybody say anything about Back 4 Blood, though, in probably a month and a half since it came out. I imagine there probably is still a lingering fan base of Back 4 Blood players, but it really failed to catch the attention of Left 4 Dead players. And there's an inherent dishonesty that was revealed in Back 4 Blood, saying it was made from the creators of Left 4 Dead, when it was really 4 or 5 creators out of 50 that worked on Back 4 Blood, and the remaining 46 or so employees had nothing to do with it. Yeah, I wonder how that works in the movie field. I think probably to get a creator credit when making a movie, you have to be the writer to get a creator credit. If you just had the original concept, maybe you could get a different kind of credit and claim that the movie was from the person who wrote the original pitch for a movie. But if you worked as a assistant to the director in a movie, almost certainly you would not be able to then go make your own movie and say from the creators of that movie, there's this movie. And oddly, the crediting system would be one thing that independent games companies are getting away with kind of lying about it, or being slightly dishonest about it. Whereas if there was more unionization in the video game industry, crediting would get written down as hard rules, and somebody would, both in the thank you credits at the end of the game and in the claim of who actually created a game, all of that would potentially go to arbitration, and there would be whole fights about who really worked on things. We would probably see a lot of cases where Ken Levine, like the creator of BioShock, or Peter Molyneux, the creator of Fallout. I mean, not Fallout, Fable. All of them potentially could have been taken to arbitration at specific times as to how much they really did input to making certain games. I wouldn't be surprised if it turned out Peter Molyneux did very little to actually create Fable 2 or Fable 3. I wouldn't be surprised if Ken Levine had less to do with the creation of Fallout Infinite than what it would seem like. Although it does generally seem like it's more the opposite, both for Ken Levine and Peter Molyneux, that they throw out ideas in interviews and then the actual programmers have to struggle to add those ideas to the gameplay, so they are at some weird way creating the games in a very chaotic way of doing it. Moving on, March's Xbox Game Pass titles include Guardians of the Galaxy, plus Lightning Returns, Final Fantasy XIII, Flight Simulator on Cloud, and more. So it's kind of funny. They said they weren't 100% thrilled with the sales of Guardians of the Galaxy, although it was definitely a critical darling. So it's a little weird that it's coming to cloud, console, and PC through the Xbox Games Pass so quickly. But that does seem like that is going to be the standard thing, is that once you're 6 weeks to 6 months out of your launch window, games will come to Games Pass, and if Microsoft owns the company, the game may very well come out during the launch window on day one. Far and Kentucky Route Zero and Lawn Mowing Simulator, and I don't even know what that one is. Okay, let's do this. We need a ritual monster. We need this ritual monster. And let's see what this does. Use this card once just to return it to us. And destroy. And that didn't do anything. Alright, so I probably already lost. Let's see. Video Games Chronicle says fans think Game Freak teased Pokemon Scarlet and Violet in Sword and Shield. Which I guess you could probably consider that. Like you see this wallpaper, although that's hardly Scarlet and Violet in colors. That's orange or yellow and raspberry. A orange and a grape, which I guess oranges and grapes are both the national fruits of Spain and feature prominently in the trailer of the new game. Okay, so that's the logic behind it. It's not the colors, it's the fruits. Which, yeah, sure. That it's very believable. But what does that really matter? I said it last stream, it's like all they've done is put out this teaser to get people drooling for a new Pokemon game, when really people should just calm their heels a little bit and and not go crazy about a new Pokemon game. If anything, think about how Sword and Shield really wasn't that good, and how while Pokemon Legends Arceus was pretty well received, it still had major technical issues, and there are things that were addressed in Pokemon Legends Arceus that seem to be kind of undone in the new Scarlet in the new Pokemon game, because they're going back to 2 games, and that really doesn't, that really is just a non-starter for me. It's like, as an individual gamer, I don't want to have to buy 2 Pokemon games, particularly as an adult. I don't want to have to try and trade Pokemon with little kids, or other adults that might be playing Pokemon. I would hope there aren't any parents out there that are actively having to buy 2 copies of basically the same game for 2 or more kids. But that's exactly what Game Freak is trying to have happen. There is a pretty bad anti-sharing message that is underlying the whole concept of Pokemon. Like, we have, maybe in the anime you've seen it a couple times where people have given Pokemon or lent Pokemon out to Ash Ketchum. But in the game, you don't do that at all. There's no sharing. There is no, hey, I know you need this, why don't you take this for a while. There's no gifting of Pokemon in the actual games. It's only trading. It's only a one-to-one barter system. It's only capitalism. When you go to a shop, you're always spending the Pokebucks to buy things. Sometimes you may do a job and get something in exchange for doing a job as an item, but there's no real generosity, particularly when you consider the age of most of these characters in the Pokemon games. Is like, these are little 10-year-old kids. So yeah, there really is not any cooperation messages either. Like, Pokemon doesn't really teach kids to be very good, on top of being kind of violent with the Pokemon, which it is a sad statement that the world of Pokemon uses these Pokemon just to fight each other more than anything else. And there's never been really any kind of story. I mean, it would feel like a very false story if Pokemon just had a natural tendency to fight each other and it was in their instincts to fight. I've never seen anything that made it feel like the Pokemon actually wanted to fight at all. Even when they're wild, they're really just defending themselves from being domesticated or captured and enslaved by these little kids. And yeah, I know they need to make a game, but for one of the most popular kid-friendly games out there, you have to admit that if there was a better teacher / parent in charge of making Pokemon, they would try to teach some better values than what is taught in Pokemon. As sappy as it may be to see cartoons that are like the power of friendship, that's the kind of stuff you really want to try to instill in the young kids, to give them a chance of actually believing in it for a while, or trying to embrace it. Like, if you even look at the Ash Ketchum character in the Pokemon anime, like, sure, Misty and Brock were around for a long time, but at a certain point they got rid of Misty and replaced her Brock, I think they got rid of for a while, and then they brought him back. But overall, Ash Ketchum has left his family, left any friends in his original village, wandered for what feels like years and years, met people, pretended like he's created some friendly rivalries with these people, and then left to never see them again. Like, there seems not to be any kind of pen pal system in the Pokedex or email system that happens. It seems like sometimes he calls home or writes a letter home in the anime, and that's about it. Like, just being this wandering Poke trainer is not a good way to live a life, in my opinion. Like, it would make more sense if there was an actual Pokemon school and Ash Ketchum was going to school and training Pokemon and learning other things and talking to his friends at the Pokemon school, and then on the weekends during the summer vacations he would go out and challenge a gym, and because that would be more in line with, say, somebody having piano recitals or lessons in the real world. They still go to school, they still have that foundation, that base where they're talking to their friends on Monday through Friday, and then on the weekend they go to piano lessons or they go to play soccer or something like that. But just giving Ash Ketchum any level of stability would be great. Of course, that breaks the fantasy, because I imagine kids don't want to see an anime where your kids are going to school, but you could certainly make a very cool Pokemon school that did exist, and I think they've shown things that are kind of like that, but seems like Ash Ketchum is completely exempt from learning anything other than Pokemon. And of course, if I'm going on a rant here, but you don't see 50-year-old, 70-year-old Pokemon trainers at the gym. Like, so if Ash Ketchum really did become super successful as a Pokemon trainer, unless it comes with a stipend of millions upon millions of Pokebucks that sets him for life, where he never has to work or do anything with his life, and even that would be pretty boring for him, I'm sure, after all the action he's seen. Like, Ash Ketchum potentially could win Pokemon tournaments, become a gym leader somewhere, and then more than likely before he's 50, he's going to either have to retire or let some other up-and-coming Ash Ketchum kid defeat him and take his position. And then he's just going to be this old man who has nothing to do with his life and retired at far too young of an age. You see that with real-world athletes. Like, they go to the Olympics when they're 18 years old, 17 years old, and that's the only thing they can do. Like, that is the peak of their life, and at best, you go to the Olympics, you get a gold, and then you follow a news circuit for a couple years and then set up some kind of gym where you're then immediately teaching other, like, kids, 10-year-olds, that one day, if they try real hard, they might be one out of the billion that would actually go to the Olympics. You even see that with, like, professional football players. Is you have these younger 25, 30-year-olds playing footballs, but you don't have that. There are no old men in the NFL. Although, in all fairness, in the United States, we have this increasing problem where there are no old people in jobs either. Like, even the managers that should be in their 60s and 70s are getting fired and replaced with cheaper labor, younger labor. Moving on. That was quite a bit of a rant. A hacker group has reportedly stolen NVIDIA's deep learning super sampling source code, which that is source code that probably would be very nice if it was open source anyways. This is at some level there is that conflict where NVIDIA is a business and they want their products to have that advantage, so they have these trade secrets in deep learning super sampling code that if they had made that open source, would have been AMD video cards, Intel video cards that also could do as well or better, and potentially everybody could work together to create better deep learning super sampling code for better games. So it would definitely be better for the gamers and the consumers if the code was open source and multiple people were working on it. That's true for almost all open source code. Security code, encryption code is about the only thing that you might want to keep secret, but even that, most of the time people argue that being open source about most of security and encryption code helps find unforeseen flaws and bugs. Anyways, their code being stolen, as far as NVIDIA potentially being hacked, is not the part that I'd be particularly concerned about. They say they've stolen over 1 terabyte of data. If 1 terabyte of data is the right kind of data, if it's users and pass names and credit cards of consumers, that's a much bigger deal than it's 1 terabyte of pointless emails and maybe a little bit of code. Apparently it includes employees' passwords, which that's easier to reset certainly than everyone's passwords, but they probably will just want to reset everyone's passwords at some point within the next month or so. We'll almost certainly have anybody that signs into the GeForce experience will be asked to change their password, and maybe even improve the security on their passwords. But they could also be salted in hash passwords, so there might be a way that's less likely to be decrypted. Maybe not. Depends on how deep, I guess, they get into that. Internally, NVIDIA's design ideas and schematics for their next level video cards is probably a lot more valuable than just the source code for deep learning super sampling. Like, if AMD knows that NVIDIA is working on a video card that's coming out in 2 years that's going to have, say, 12 cores and 32 gigabytes of DDR6, then AMD can just have a 14 core with a little bit more RAM, a little bit more cores, or run at a higher clock speed. and so they can pivot and gain advantage there. Let's see. Moving on, Video Games Chronicle says a week before its release, around 20% of the WWE's 2K22 roster no longer work for WWE. 35 playable superstars have left the company. I had heard certainly that there was struggles at the WWE and that there was this kind of purge. Like, the problem inherently is Vince McMahon and manipulating talent and underpaying talent, having them be independent contractors, having them, I believe, have to arrange their own transportation and pay for their own transportation from event to event. Although I don't even know if they're even going to event locations yet, because for a long time now they've just been shooting out of a training facility that they had. But yeah, they said departed talent has been a long-standing issue for the WWE. Games due to the lengthy production style and how frequently and randomly the WWE releases talent. Some superstars on the list have only just left the company, such as Cesaro. Others, such as Billy Kay and Peyton Royce, were released from their contracts as far back as April 2021. And I bet Vince McMahon does not care one bit as far as the wrestling game. If anything, I wouldn't be surprised if Vince McMahon is actively trying to screw over WWE 2K. Yeah. Because of some slight disagreement. Darn it. Well, my only hope then would be this. I really am not liking how this deck really only has one chance. Yeah. Like, it has one gimmick, and if that one gimmick fails, you've just lost. So the full list here, who have left the company are strucken out here. So Alexander Wolfe, Billy Kay, Braun Strowman. I don't recognize any of these names. Cesaro, Danny Burch. At a certain point, maybe that's the point, is that people generally wouldn't recognize these names. Ember Moon, Fandango, I recognize him. Grand Metalik, Isaiah Swerve Scott, Jeff Hardy, I recognize him. John Morrison, Johnny Rango, this is kind of small text. Callisto, Kyron Cross, Keith Lee, Kyle O'Reilly, Lana, Lince Dorado, Miami Vim, Mickey James, Murphy, Oni Larson, Peyton Royce, Samoa Joe, isn't he really old? Scarlett as a manager, Slapjack, Tegan Knox, the Brian Kendrick, Tony Storm, Tucker, Tyler Breeze, William Regal, I recognize him. But as long as I guess they have The Undertaker and Triple H, there's much bigger names on this list. So I don't know how many people are going to care, but I bet some people will care. And certainly, because I don't recognize all of these names, I can't help but assume that what's going on here is that they are firing or letting go of their contracts the newer people, which would be the next generation of wrestlers. So if WWE is going to manage to survive another generation, it needs that fresh blood. It would be interesting, but I definitely wouldn't waste my time actually looking it up to see. It would be interesting though to find out what wrestling fans feel about these people being let go, whether they really care or whether they don't. I feel like most wrestling fans are probably kids and teenagers, or just people that get drunk and watch wrestling because there's nothing else on. And I wouldn't be surprised if they don't particularly care too much as far as who they're looking at or who they're following. I know in the brief period of time that I enjoyed watching wrestling, I really was just watching for the Stone Cold Steve Austin character more than anything else, and during the era that I was watching, he was all over it. So I could tell you that The Undertaker was there, and I could tell you that Triple H was there also, but and China was there. But on top of those, like 5 top tier, but really getting pushed to the forefront characters, I really probably couldn't name any of the other wrestlers. Also, I have to say that what appealed to me during the Stone Cold Steve Austin era was that it was becoming a incredibly ridiculous soap opera, and there was very little wrestling that I was paying attention to or remembering. In the past year or two, I have for a few minutes flipped over to wrestling these days, and it is much more focused on actually doing the wrestling, which I find completely uninteresting. Moving on, Switch Online subscribers now have missions and custom icon features. Nintendo says it will refresh the custom icon elements on offer every week. So now you could do, I guess, missions/achievements to get My Nintendo Platinum points, which sounds like they're going to a level of multiple currencies. To confuse the issue even more, users can redeem Platinum points for the traditional selection of digital and physical items at the My Nintendo store, but the company has also added new member exclusive icon elements. So yeah, seems like there is multiple currencies. They're just sliding into the worst case scenario here with Nintendo Online. So you can now also get NES and Super NES games for Platinum points, which I think points out that they finally started to realize that there's a lot less value in their old emulated games than they thought it would be. But you're still having to pay for the online service. There's also rumors that Game Boy games are coming to Switch Online. Looking at the pricing here, if it's $10 for pictures, or 10 platinum points for pictures, I wouldn't be surprised if icons are 30 to 50. I have no idea what icon elements are. Maybe it's just a border where you could... I bet they don't let you use your own photos at all. There's probably no way to upload a photo, just for safety. So yeah, you may get missions that give you exactly 1 platinum point every week, or 5 platinum points, or 8 platinum points every week, and then you need 10 to buy even a single cheap item. Moving on, FIFA 23 will reportedly include crossplay and expanded Women's League. I think we had already pretty much heard this news, so I don't think there's anything new to say there. They're moving in a way to get away from the FIFA name being the only focus. And then Twisted Metal's TV show has been picked up for a series. It'll be on Peacock. We had already talked about that. The Ukrainian developed Stalker 2 is on hold as studios help employees and families survive. Quote, "We will definitely continue after the victory," GSC says. After having just played Fallout 3, it would have made a lot of sense to go and play Stalker 1. Although now I would say there's a danger of a lot of ranting happening, and it's kind of a better story to play Stalker 1 and say, well, Ukraine was attacked by Russia and survived by the end of playing Stalker 1, or even say Ukraine was attacked by Russia and didn't survive, and thus Stalker 2 is never going to happen. It's not a particularly good narrative to push to start playing Stalker 1 right now and then it still be up in the air and uncertain. Of course, there's always this level of uncertainty. Like, depending on how things go, Russia could potentially retreat from Ukraine today and then invade them a week from or a month from now when they reorganize their troops and rebuild. Yeah, there's a certain logic in warfare that I don't know people want to admit or accept, in that once the ranks have been broken, once a side retreats, you really have to just chase them down and arrest them or kill them. Like, you can't just let somebody retreat to come back and try again later. Because there is a real danger of potentially Russia retreating back into Russia and then using that as a narrative to become the next Nazi Germany that can just blame all of its problems and all of its economic issues on everybody else and unify its people. Right now it seems like its people aren't particularly unified and raring to go to war, but give it a couple years and mishandle the situation well enough, and certainly that could be a unified Russian people for war would be a much bigger issue, or a much bigger problem. But I am going to try very hard not to talk about Ukraine too much, unless it is specifically about video games, and there's an actual article about it, but even then I'm going to try to keep it short and pithy. Epic Games has acquired the internet music company Bandcamp. The site will keep operating as a standalone marketplace and music company, says the CEO. I don't know if people really use Bandcamp anymore. It definitely was a big thing in the old days. I would assume that Bandcamp will potentially be a source of some music for Fortnite, and at some point the Epic Games launcher or the Epic's Assets Store will have some level of merging with Bandcamp. So if you are trying to make an Unreal Engine game, going to the Unreal Assets Store, you would be able to potentially license out Bandcamp music. So it's not a terrible acquisition. It's kind of out of left field, but it's not a terrible thought, certainly, as far as an acquisition. It may be an indication that as far as Epic, they have not created enough relationships or just established themselves well enough to acquire just general video game companies. There also might be a case that there aren't that many video game companies left that are willing to negotiate to be acquired. Here's a bit of self-aggrandizing from Video Games Chronicle. They're saying they were nominated for Games Media Brand of the Year by the MCV Awards, which I've never heard of. MCV Develop Awards. Apparently it's been around for 20 years, and it's a UK games industry thing, and I guess Video Games Chronicles is a UK company, come to think of it. So that might explain why I haven't heard of it, but it is a sad statement, really, but it has to be said that Video Games Chronicles is probably one of the best mainstream video game news sources, and that's why I use them. But that really just is because the bar is so incredibly low as far as mainstream video game journalism. A great example of that is like Giant Bomb this week, which I'm still listening to the Bombcast, spent nearly its entire first half saying first half of its like 3-hour podcast saying basically nothing about Elden Ring, and yet still talking about Elden Ring. And then they spent probably about 12 minutes saying Babylon's Fall is garbage and talking about everything else. It was very, very curt and brief. So I would definitely say that they fell into a mistake that any mainstream video game journalist might fall into, where if there's one big popular game, they talk about it too much and ignore the other games, when really there should be a push to cover the other games that come out as equally as possible and give some counter programming to what everybody else is going to talk about. But video game journalism is so much about getting those clicks and just clickbaiting that they don't even care about something that wouldn't be the most popular thing. And oddly, I will say that they brought on another guy, a new guy basically, to this week's Giant Bombcast, and it felt like he was really interviewing to be a new manager, maybe replacement for Jeff or even Bacalor, because it did kind of feel like, hey, let's get you on this Bombcast and have you talk about how you do things and how you run your business, and like that oddly felt like they were interviewing him to be a new guy or a replacement. Although it's very possible he is also just talking about how he does things as a manager or somewhere else. So we'll see. And they got rid of the female broadcaster this week to make room for the male character, which, like, they really didn't need to, if that was really the reason she wasn't there. Void Burger, I think is what she goes by. She was noticeably absent when there's always a couple of guys that have nothing to really say that much, and yet they are always front and center on the face cams. Yeah. Alright, well, let's see if he's gonna resolve or not. I'm just gonna lose anyways. Let's see. Video Games Chronicle says EA is removing all Russian teams from FIFA 22 and NHL 22. The publisher has initiated processes to remove the international teams and all club teams, which I wonder if this is a money issue as much as it is just trying to get a cheap pop of support for games such as FIFA and NHL, which really don't have, which could use a cheap pop as far as sales, I imagine. Or if I wonder if it would have just been a kind of overreaction. Like, I don't know what kind of voice chat or text chat exists in FIFA 22 or in NHL 22, if you can even play against other people online. Like, I could certainly see people trolling and playing as Russian teams, but and maybe they just didn't want to moderate that, but I mean, here's where you really run into a problem, and this is where a lot of this ridiculous, I'm going to do something that's really not going to affect anything. It would make a lot more sense if they said, actually, we pay a license to everybody after the fact, and we pay continuing license every month to each FIFA team and NHL team, and we can't send the money and don't want to send the money to these Russian teams, so we are contractually obliged to remove this. That would almost make sense, but it doesn't really change the fact that you are reaching into somebody else's game effectively and changing their experience and changing the game in a very negative way. There's no way you can take it back. You are removing content, and this smacks of nobody actually owning the games they paid for in such a terrible way. And clearly EA didn't have to do any of this. They could have just said, we're not doing anything like that. They could have done a cheap pop of just tweeting out something as far as support for Ukraine. But to be so arbitrary and controlling is not a good first move. And this is going to potentially run into a scenario where people start reviewing FIFA 22 and NHL negatively, and then EA not listening to that negative feedback and just saying, oh, it's trolling, it's review bombing, when there is a legitimate content complaint here that one day you could play as a bunch of Russian teams if you wanted to, and the next day you can't. Like, if they really, like, if they really wanted to do something, they would have made something different. They would have put new skins on the Russian teams, but even that would have been changing it. It would have had to have been a patch that people could install if they want to, as far as new skins on the Russian teams. Always just leave it alone. Like, a certain level, the whole Olympics was designed around promoting world peace, and sports at a certain level, international sports, is supposed to be towards the promotion of world peace, and you're not pushing the Russian government towards peace by removing virtual characters from your video game in any way. Maybe at some small level you believe you're irritating people who are playing FIFA 22 or NHL in Russia, but yeah, I think you're hurting more people than you're helping in that situation. I'm gonna draw a card and I'm gonna hope this destroys everything. See if this works now. Nope. So he's got at least one or two cards here that are negating my effects. Moving on, Resident Evil 2, 3, and 7 are officially coming to the PS5 and Xbox Series X. No release date for the new versions were given. These would be, I imagine, slightly upgraded graphics. I wouldn't be surprised if very little work is put into them now. Capcom loves to resell things, but they're not particularly known for putting a lot of effort into their re-releases. Well, they put some effort, but I'd say they put the medium amount of effort, not a lot. Let's see. Video Games Chronicle says Ukrainian has called on Xbox and PlayStation to end support in Russia. This would certainly do more, certainly, than just removing a team from FIFA and NHL, or removing several teams from FIFA and NHL. And it probably will happen regardless of whether Ukraine asks for it or not, because there seems like there's going to be enough sanctions and embargoes. There's probably a case where most of the internet is going to be not working in Russia. A lot of things may be, a lot of services may be proactive and try and geo-block by IP address. I wouldn't be surprised if though there's going to be a lot of VPN traffic that still could get through. It's really not as simple as cutting a wire. You could certainly cut wires and disconnect fiber optic cables in a lot of places, but there's enough satellite uplinks too that some level of communication would still exist, and you want some level of intergovernmental communication. But as far as people with Xbox Live services or PlayStation Now services, if there are financial embargoes where they cannot accept money or will not accept money from Russian people who want those services, that will pretty much put an end to it anyways. It will put an end to a lot of things. Like they want to be fairly cautious about just stopping all communication and all world trade, because capitalists run the world, and they don't want to pick a financial nuclear option that would then lead to a actual nuclear option. And there's really not, like, while I know a lot of people are upset and irate, and rightfully so in my opinion, there's not a good reason to punish the citizens of Russia so severely when they were already upset about Putin starting a war and oligarchs starting the war in Ukraine. Like, right now, the citizens are already on the side of peace. So them being punished further, which is turning off Xbox and PlayStation Now, really would hurt the citizens of Russia way more than it is Putin. I don't think Putin's playing Xbox Live or PlayStation Now or anything like that. I don't think most of the soldiers are spending a lot of time playing Xbox and PlayStation Now. So you don't want to turn someone who is very likely to be your ally into your enemy by arbitrarily punishing them. Moving on, Gran Turismo 7 Review Roundtable from Video Games Chronicles. The campaign experience is almost not worth it, says Video Games Chronicles. These are the kind of articles I should close, though, because I don't care. And in television, Amico's future is questioned as the new investment campaign ends early. Also, I think their Twitter just went silent and basically disappeared. Like, I don't know who would have thought this was a good idea in the first place and who was so gung-ho. Actually, I do know a YouTuber that was quite gung-ho about supporting this and is now pretty upset about this seemingly being a failed project. And I would just leave it at a failed project, really. It was, even looking at these like mock-ups, this is a very, very ambitious project in the middle of a part shortage. So I would just leave it at that. There will be undoubtedly people who speculate that it was a scam from the start, and it very possibly was as much a scam as an earnest plan. Like the entire concept of making an television Amico was off the back of the NES Mini, the Genesis Mini, and the Super NES Mini, and none of those really exist in the minds of people anymore. They came out, they were fine, and then they were gone. Like nobody nowadays cares that they never made a second NES Mini with a second collection of NES games, or put out any kind of expansion for the NES Mini. Nobody cares that there wasn't a second version of the Super NES, and that they never made a Nintendo 64 Mini or Game Boy Mini. If anything, I guess Nintendo maybe gambled right there by making a fairly short run of the NES Mini and getting people hyped. that were willing to buy it and then not going too far with it and over investing in something that wasn't going to last. Let's see. Apparently, the first review for Triangle Strategy has been published by Famitsu. Which is, I guess, a little early since the game releases this week. Video Games Chronicle says Valve says that it's fixed the Steam Deck's drift issues via software update. The drift issues definitely are going to have to do with a dead zoning, and at some level your dead zone is just going to be too large if you have really bad drift to the point where the controller has to be slammed into the corners to move at all, and at that point you're basically playing with a D-pad instead of a analog stick. You're losing, with any dead zone you add, you're losing some level of control. Ideally, there's this gamepad called the Thrustmaster. Makes this gamepad, I don't know the actual model, where you can pull out an analog stick and put in a D-pad, and it just like is a little plastic module that slides in and slides out. I think I kind of would like to see something like that in a Steam Deck too. You see this bezel on top here? This could be something that you spin to release the stick and then take it out and then put it back in. That would be better for storage, certainly, and it would be really good for hot swapping an analog stick that's broken with a new one. There, I got a disconnect victory, which I'll take it. But yeah, if you didn't have to take out, you probably have to take, I think, somewhere around a dozen screws out to replace the sticks. That's a little too much. And honestly, I would like to be able to just have a module that pulls out these touchpads. That's kind of a lot, but it's not insane, really. If you could yank this out, if there was like a hole in the back that you pushed a pin through and it popped out the touchpads as one plastic square, and there was just a connector that was like an IC squared connector that snaps in and snaps out, and then you had thumbsticks there otherwise, I think that would be great, and much more useful as a design, because one of the major problems I would say with the Steam Deck is it still is kind of doubling down on the idea of the touchpads, and I just don't know for my purposes and the games I would want to play if I would ever really use the thumb pads as much. You could also certainly have a cutout if they can improve the technology, and there is a cutout with an analog stick in the middle here, and then there is like this relative touchpad on the sides where when you rub it, it moves. But yeah, I still just don't know if the touchpad matters, and I definitely don't know if two touchpads matter, because it's a touch screen on top of that. So if you really needed to tap something, it'd be a touchscreen. There's an obvious evolution of this where 90% of all games would just have touchscreen integration, or that the touchscreen itself would just act as a touchpad. You would just smudge up your video. or that there's a slight touchpad on the thumb of the thumbstick, or that the thumbsticks just act in the exact same way as the touchpad does. I mean, there's a lot of different ways that could play out. Yeah, I cannot do anything here. Anyways, the story here, though, was that they said they fixed the drift issue in software. If anything, that might be an indication as to just how they are going to try and fix it and address everything in software. Valve being a software company, they're going to see every problem as a software problem and every solution as a software solution. I am probably going to play this Aperture Desktop. It is basically, though, a tech demo for the Steam Deck. So it's going to be a very odd experience, to say the least, when I do play it. And almost certainly it'll work fairly well with a controller, but would work pretty poorly if I tried to play it with a mouse and keyboard. But yeah, I'll play it and probably not put out a video anytime recently. Like, put it out in a couple months past the point where it's relevant. So special summon this. Put this face up. Destroy a card on the field. And hope this works. That worked. So is this going to be some trap? Apparently not. Let's see. Video Games Chronicle says a new Elden Ring PC mod lets players pause the game, which it sounds like something that you really would want. I don't think that Elden Ring is even a MMO or anything. But yeah, there's definitely some missing features and missing optimizations in Elden Ring from the feel of it, particularly on PC, but just in general. And I think there is definitely an argument out there that should be had and is being had about all games should require pausing. People have real world lives, and video games cannot replace a real world life. Like, parents have babies that need to change diapers, kids have dinner time and homework. There's nobody that doesn't need to make use of the pause every now and then, even if they don't. And the whole "you can't pause online games" meme, while somewhat true, also is more of an excuse than a set in stone rule. We could pause online games. Like, there may be a bit of a compromise there where a player pauses and then their character transports back to a hub city or becomes immortal and just is AFK in MMO. Like, maybe you put some limitations that you can't pause in the middle of a battle, but a lot of MMORPGs are all battles, so that doesn't really solve that problem. Maybe in pausing, you just immediately lose the battle with lesser penalties. or you immediately run away and surrender. But yeah, those are things that could easily be written into the storyline and written into the gameplay mechanic, and people have just not bothered to try. And yes, it's annoying when certain players pause and then unpause trying to break the stride of a player, but that could just be a part of video game playing. That kind of was a part of video game playing back in the day. Like, it was not uncommon to have somebody just hit the pause button, and in tournaments, if you hit the pause button, you're disqualified. So we've already gotten a solution in like fighting game tournaments when they have in the fight sticks specific switches to lock out the pause button so you can't accidentally hit it. Oh, speaking of fight sticks, GameStop has At Legends fight sticks on sale right now. You could get the 2 fight stick with the mouse ball like for $100, and you can get the 1 fight stick for $50, which is it's expensive certainly, but it's not super expensive. It is on sale. Darn it. Okay. Guess what we do here is we set a card here, we set a card here, and then we end the turn, and then we hope he just concedes. Bringing his character back. Let's see. Moving on, Video Games Chronicle says Ghostwire Tokyo Prelude is a free visual novel out on the PS5 and PS4. It's a prologue to the main game, which, yeah, we're seeing some monsters here. Interesting to have a visual novel released exclusively to the PS5 and PS4, but yeah, that's probably something you'd want to see more of. There is a slight danger that means that there is not a good setup to the story of Ghostwire Tokyo, and that certainly could be annoying. Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think I'm gonna win here. Video Games Chronicle also had this article. Early Steam Deck owners are already reporting stick drift. I wouldn't be surprised if we do see several issues, though, of just like not the best quality control as far as the Steam Deck. That would be my expectation. Again, I think you're much better to think about buying a Steam Deck 2. And if you don't have a good PC that can Steam Link and stream to the Steam Deck, building a good PC at the moment is a way better idea. Let's see. Moving on, Video Games Chronicles says a Jedi Fallen Order Lego set has been spotted online. Not a Lego video game, so don't be confused there. Kind of had forgotten about Jedi Fallen Order as a game at this point. So if there's a Lego set coming out, it either means that they are going to make another Fallen Order, which they probably were, or Lego's just been incredibly slow to release this set. Which, at a certain point, you may argue that the Horizon Zero Dawn Lego set was actually based on the original Horizon Zero Dawn and not the Forbidden West sequel. Lego, personally, like, I found some broken Legos as I was moving some Legos around and found that I needed to mess with some of the Lego sets to get them to work. Particularly the NES set of having the cartridge go up and down and stay in the lockdown position is not working. So I need to pull up the instructions again and rebuild it. Maybe make some modifications. But yeah, as I was putting one set together, I found some pieces that had just been broken. I don't know if they just started deteriorating or if I put too much force on them, but I'm trying to order these replacement pieces and they just don't have the replacement pieces in stock. And I don't know if I really want to go through Bricklink to try and order the pieces, but I may have no choice. And a significant percentage of the sets I have on my wish list on Lego's online shop is just missing. It's like the item has been removed from the database completely, and on top of that percentage, there's an even bigger percentage of sets that are just marked as sold out. Like, I don't think Lego is getting the repair parts or the raw material or something. Maybe it's even the cardboard or the plastic bags to make sets, or they're just having shipping problems. But yeah, they definitely don't feel like they have as much in stock as they did a year ago, and it's getting difficult, to say the least, to maintain the obsessive collection of Lego. Which maybe is a good thing, honestly. Moving on, Xbox Live Gold free games for March have been announced. Which, let's see. It'll be Flame in the Flood, Street Power Soccer, Sacred 2, Fallen Angel, and SpongeBob's Truth or Squares. We had already talked about that. Gamatsu says Cult of the Lamb is confirmed for the PS5, Xbox Series, PS4, Xbox One, and Switch. Babylon's Fall, Combat 101 trailer and screenshots. Knockout City going free to play. Relayer demo available. Earth Defense Forces 6 4th trailer. You know what I think is happening here? Because these are all articles I also talked about. There must be a Gamatsu flagged. Yeah, there must be a favorited article on Gamatsu also that is throwing things off, but throwing things off in an oddly different way. Because we definitely talked about this article, and this article, and this article, and this article, and this one, and this one, and that 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 one. I think this is either something is not saving correctly, I'll need to check the comma separated value files. I think we had talked about this game Young Souls. This is the, yeah, this is rated M for mature beat 'em up game. Yeah, we talked about that. That caught my attention. We talked about that. This is going to make it very easy to go through the news if you just are closing all the tabs real quick. I think this is new news. In Zone: A World Apart Survivor Edition coming to the PS4 and Xbox Series on May 19th. We have a general idea. They were blurred out picture as to what kind of game it is. It looks like it's a post-apocalyptic city builder, city manager. I don't know if there really is a case. Yeah, I'm going to be defeated in one turn here. One turn kill, take 10,000 damage without doing anything at all. Like, I activate a trap and that's it. I would consider it, but I would have to be fairly careful about whether I really wanted to play a city builder, particularly a city builder in a post-apocalyptic setting. I'm already gonna have to play some part of that in Fallout 4. I'm not a huge fan of city management, city builders in the first place, and I don't know if I really want to play that many games in a post-apocalypse, particularly in the middle of all the current affairs. Now would be a kind of great time to stick to fantasy, elves and dragons and things like that. And like, if you play video games for escapism, as most people do on some level, like the militaristic first-person shooting style games probably should be put on the back burner. Right, let's continue with the news. PlayStation Now adds Shadow Warrior 3, Crisis Remaster, Relicta, and Chicken Police Paint It Red in March. We'd already talked about that, but I think that's new for Komatsu. Strangers in Paradise, Final Fantasy Origin Story, and Battle Japanese TV commercials are out if you want to check that. I guess we can go through the games that have come out. I don't know if there's really a great reason to play anything here, but since we've got nothing better to do, might as well special summon this, sacrifice this, put this back in my hand. Then I can bring out another spell. Let's see if we can counter it. While we're in there, here we have a game that's just a hidden object game, search all mushrooms. So obviously that's a no-go. Circle, laser maze. Doesn't look visually polished enough. Squarina doesn't look like it's good enough to justify the fall list. $8.09 is pretty expensive also. I guess we really don't have to look to see if something has been Steam Deck verified. The number of games that are going to have that is going to be very, very low, it seems like. This Lonely Tribes looks like nothing. Alright, let's try this again. And I guess try this again. It's probably not worth 800 life to summon this guy, but guy/girl, whatever. And this guy is pulling out all the stops to irritate me. Here we have a game called Brain, or B-Rain. Screenshots aren't even loading, but I can tell by the thumbnails it's not even that interesting. Free to play, Korean only. No to that. Mini Island we can say no to immediately because it's one of these island games that flood Steam. It definitely was thinking that had I ordered a Steam Deck and had Gabe Newell come to my door to hand deliver it, I'd probably want to talk to him for a while about some of these developers. And frankly, I could just email him if I really cared and thought that he'd actually respond or have even the authority to respond, which I'm not sure he really has any authority at Valve. More maybe just a pretense of authority. But yeah, some of these game developers are kind of abusing the privilege by putting out 2 or 3 games a month, or 2 or 3 games a day even, in some cases. And so here we have a game called Inner World. I don't know why nothing is really loading today. The videos aren't loading, but obviously this game doesn't look good enough for me to really care. They probably were just having a slight internet hiccup. But yeah, I will say that on my cell phone I managed to put my hand right over the antenna as it was trying to connect to the internet, and it did have a slight hiccup for about 30 seconds in which it lost connection, and then it immediately fixed itself without me having to interfere at all, which is 100% opposite of what I was having in the past, where it would have the hiccup and it would stay hiccuped up for 2-3 minutes at most, or more, and often I would have to just like full on reset the Wi-Fi or reset the entire router. They're already talking about Wi-Fi 7, and so Wi-Fi 6 and Wi-Fi 6E have seemingly been put out as standards and abandoned in favor of Wi-Fi 7. Which I wouldn't be surprised if there's going to be kind of a mad rush to get to Wi-Fi 10 and try and have a Wi-Fi 10 or Wi-Fi 11 so it stays in line with Windows 10 and Windows 11. With there being fairly little change between like a Wi-Fi 7 and a Wi-Fi 6E. Although there is kind of a fairly big change that is happening at the moment between Wi-Fi 6, Wi-Fi 6E, and Wi-Fi 7 in that there are actual different frequencies, so much so that you actually won't get any benefit for most devices in the difference between Wi-Fi 6, Wi-Fi 6E, and Wi-Fi 7. And it's only going to be for new devices if new devices decide to actually adopt and use that. And mostly the new devices people are going to get are cell phones. And I have yet to hear anything about any cell phone that says it's supporting Wi-Fi 6E or Wi-Fi 7. Frankly, I would just be happy if cell phones stuck to supporting micro SD cards. The headphone jack argument has already been lost. Moving on, we have a game called 4Z, which looks like a kind of colorful 4-in-a-row match game. That's competitive though, and it's labeled as coming soon. I'm gonna put this on the fall list, but there seems to be a lot of games here being labeled as coming soon, and I don't like this precedent that we might start just be putting things on the fall list when they don't even have official release dates. This game, Yume Iri, I'm gonna say no to because the graphics are too low. Pants Quest is probably a point-and-click adventure joke game, but it looks like it's animated well enough to deserve a follow. So I'll leave it at that. Do this. Activate this. Give me that. Okay. And let's leave everything alone otherwise. Let's see. Here we have Num 1 Revised Edition, which I assume is just a 2048 clone. Looks like that's what it is. So, nothing special there. 100 Doors Escape from Work. Looks kind of like an Escape the Room mobile game port. What's the price on it? $9.99? English with allegedly full audio, I think. I could consider that, certainly. I probably would say no, but I suspect that there is several games on the fall list right now that are Escape the Room games that look worse than that does. So it might be a good trade-up. Here we have something called Daydream that looks like it's just a visual novel. Campus Daily Gal game. That's what it's described as, but then there's a tag here for word game. But I think they're misunderstanding the tag word game, because this definitely just looks like a visual novel, and it doesn't even seem like it supports English. It's free, Japanese and Chinese. Yep, this is definitely written in English in the description for kind of no good reason. Like, clearly you can just type in Chinese and Japanese characters. So why put any English here at all in your description? Why not fully write it in Japanese? I bet there's some level of confusion there where you have to write the description of your game in English for submission, and then they just copy that description over to the store page description, where it would make more sense to see this as a game that is 100% in Japanese or Chinese in its description and its page, so it's just obvious that it does not it's not something for people who speak English or only. Next we have a game here called Chaos Girl, which looks a little rough. Yeah, I think it is a little too rough. Like, there's some aspects here that, as a platforming hack and slash game, that I could see may have wanted to go somewhere, but you're seeing a lot of generic backgrounds and like one enemy on the screen at most. This is early access, 359, bunch of languages. I think I'm willing to risk that not being on the fall list, and then if it comes back and is somehow really popular, then maybe at that point I would catch some wind of the game being good. Right. I should have put this on the field. We'll have to wait and see what he lets me do. Next we have a game called Small Crystal, which looks like a top-down hack and slash or twin stick shooter. Doesn't look visually polished enough. They're comparing it to Binding of Isaac. And we have Breaking Newton, which looks like a frustration platformer with a lot of shadow and darkness. A lot of dark screenshot syndrome. Here we have Roko's Island, Ring to Eden the Pain, End the Pain. Okay. I don't have any more spells. So, well, you can do this, you're just gonna lose. Sounds like a unique name, Ring to End the Pain. The actual gameplay seems like it's an adventure, kind of point and click adventure with some mini games. So yeah, I'll put that on the fall list. Apparently it was already on the fall list. It's March 2nd is when it's coming out. So we'll see if people like it. This is one of the shining examples of a game that's not getting coverage and probably should get coverage. I know more often than not we go through these live streams and 98% of every game on Steam is just garbage and it's just a quick no. But every now and then, maybe it's once every 2 or 3 months, we do run into something like Roko's Island where there's just been no advertisement for it at all. It seems like it's a true indie game that nobody's heard about. And it may not even be the case that that's the truth. It is very possible that this game actually did put out a teaser trailer several months ago, and I've just forgotten about it because of the way the advertisement cycles go in video games. But it certainly is a forgotten / hidden gem to me. And when I see a game like this, even if it turns out it's not even a game worth playing, it justifies the heavy investment of actually trying to be somewhat informed about every game that comes out on Steam, instead of just being like most people who let themselves be led by the nose via sites like Giant Bomb or Kotaku that really only talk about one game a week, and it's always a Call of Duty game or a major AAA game that you would have heard about anyways. Like there is particularly a chance if you were a teenager now versus 10 years ago that you would have teenagers that would find more out there and weird games, and they would have more to talk about instead of just everybody talking about Halo, which if people in my school when I was a kid were talking about video games, they were talking about something like Halo or Call of Duty. It was nothing but that. Although, in fairness, they weren't talking, not that many people talking about video games at all when I was in school. Moving on, we have a game called Vector Ball here, which it's vectorized graphics, or an attempt at looking like vectorized graphics. Does not really appeal to me visually, and it just kind of comes off as being a little asset flippy. It requires VR, and frankly, invoking the idea that VR requires vector-based graphics and that it needs to look like an improved Virtual Boy is not the way to sell VR to anyone. And it's not true either. There's no requirement at all for vector-based graphics in VR. There's plenty of good-looking VR games out there. Or not great-looking VR games. The graphics do look a little bad. They tend to, at least. And at a certain point, the reason why VR graphics tend to look bad is because there is this focus on a wider field of view that's necessary, and game engines are just not designed to actually depict that wide field of view in that many pixels. Let's see what happens here. Well, it's not. Here we have a game on Steam called Entity Researcher, which doesn't look visually polished enough. It's a dungeon crawler. Here we have one called Scare Project of Fear, which suffers from dark screenshot syndrome. So I'm gonna say no to that. English, Portuguese, Brazil. Let's go and just destroy that. Shoot. Ah, darn it. I resolved the wrong one the wrong way. That is a great example of me losing the game for myself. I can't blame anybody else but myself there. That was just not paying enough attention. And yeah, we've been going 2 hours, but actually I'm a little shocked we're closer to the finishing than I thought we would be. Gamatsu says Yosuke Shiokawa founded Fahrenheit 213, has opened its own official website and announced an untitled RPG for PC. I assume this is a video game company, Fahrenheit 213. And these sketches here do feel like it's going to be some kind of futuristic Final Fantasy style game. Final Fantasy VII style game would be my guess. Like a major evil corporation something like that. Alright, well. Let's see. A game called Apathy Naragami Gakuin Nana Fugishi launches August 4th in Japan. This is, I'm pretty sure, the first I've heard of this. But maybe not. I feel like I've seen this art style before a couple times. Definitely looks weird to say the least. Some crazy psycho killers here. And horrific horror. Like two faces merged together. It almost gives the feeling, looking at these 8 students, like this is going to be a Danganronpa style story, visual novel of horror, more horror than just murder mystery. Next, Shinigami Shibito Majiri has a teaser and trailer. Another visual novel that I would assume is going to be of the darker persuasion. Horror. Yeah, looks like horror, murder, mystery type stuff. Slightly older looking characters in a different art style. But yeah. So I'd almost assume that these 2 horror games are being made by the same publisher, and that they came out as the same announcement. Because that tends to be, I think, how they do things, is announce a couple of young Mei Nodame visual novel, romance visual novels, and then announce under a different publishing company some horror visual novels. That's one of the things that makes Shadowverse's solo story visual novel so irritating, is that A, it doesn't really have horror or sci-fi or intrigue or romance, and it is just very generic writing and very generic violence, and it's just been done and repeated so often that there's not anything to it. You don't get extra points for activating a card twice, so you might as well leave it in your hand. Gematsu has the games that are coming out to Xbox Game Pass. We don't need to cover that again. The pixel art side-scrolling action RPG Mifumado has been announced for PS5, Xbox Series PS4, Xbox One, Switch, and PC. Which, yeah, it's a little zoomed out, but it does kind of feel like it is doing its own thing too. Seems like you're going to several different environments and fighting several different kind of monster characters. Apparently it's being kickstarted, so hopefully it's fully funded and will actually come out. But who's to say? See, that pretty much kills any chance of winning here. Once you go below 2,000. Yep, that's the end of it for me. Gamatsu has the same story for the Back for Blood Tunnels of Terror expansion, launching April 12th. Republic Anniversary Edition launches March 10th, and Camouflage with a J establishes a Japanese branch led by Matt Walker. Interesting that you would have a Western guy run a Japanese branch, but whatever. This is the Devil May Cry 5 producer, being joined by a localization legend, which maybe Matt Walker is the localization legend. Republic has always been a game that kind of caught my attention, but never seemed to be that popular or that well programmed. So hopefully the Anniversary Edition can be a slight improvement or give some reason to it. The Devil May Cry 5 producer Matt Walker is the Devil May Cry producer is Matt Walker. The localization legend is Alexander O. Smith. They shouldn't have broken up his name like that. The credits go back to Final Fantasy VIII. I might as well have surrendered there, but I should have just ended the game and gotten 100 points. If I recall correctly, Republic is kind of this weird stealth game though, where you're not directly controlling the character, and that's always been like a weird option, and they'd really never made a sequel from it. It really wouldn't be a counterpoint to playing something like Metal Gear Solid, particularly since most of the Metal Gear games are not on Steam. There isn't, I think, enough of an audience for stealth games to just try and do a whole series of stealth games. I don't think there's enough stealth games out there. Moving on, Little Orpheus for PS5, Xbox Series, PS4, Xbox One, Switch, and PC has been delayed. So, we haven't had a ton of delays as much as you might expect. Omori for the PS4 and Switch now has pre-orders available. I don't feel like I've seen this game before. It's rated M for mature. Definitely feels like it's going to be actually a horror game, and it's trying to sucker you in with these cutesy pencil sketch graphics. But yeah, apparently it launched on Steam already, so let's just open its Steam page and see how people feel about it. Maybe that'll bring some relevancy to it. There is this weird hope that by re-releasing old games on new consoles, some of these lesser known games may gain an audience, but I think it's mostly a false hope. I just don't think that happens anywhere as much as people would think. Here's Omori without the blurring. It definitely does not feel like much of anything. It really just feels like a psychological horror RPG game. That being said, overwhelmingly positive, and it is already on my wish list. So, yeah, I've made the right decision. It would just now be a point of when am I actually going to get around to buying / playing that game, if ever. Which that's the big if, certainly. See if he tries to counter anything. do this. Tribute this. Summon that. See if he activates this, we destroy this. Guess because of the way this is going to be activated, we'll just draw a card. Darn it. Moving on, Gematsu has an article here. NIS America has revealed a new logo ahead of its 20th anniversary. The official website has also been revamped. Take note, they have gone from NIS America in their logo to just NIS. And it is doing brush strokes very reminiscent of Japanese, whereas this is more just kind of a font choice. This potentially would open up in my mind the idea, what do they call that? Sumi ink wash painting. This brings about my mind that NIS America is taking a step potentially to be the official headquarters, people in charge of Nippon Ichi Software, or Japan One Software, if you want to translate it. There have been some pushes, certainly, that NIS America has tried to convince its overlords in Japan to give them some more authorities and not be so crazy about doing copyright content ID takedowns of the of things like, I believe Persona is published by NIS. So yeah, it might be a step in the right direction that we might at some point get a full go-ahead to do full playthroughs from beginning to the end of the older Persona games and brand new Persona games without fear of people doing DMCAs. Speaking of DMCAs, Horizon Zero, Horizon Forbidden West, the model of Alloy was apparently modeled with nipples, like kind of big, sort of dark areolas. And somebody was able to use kind of a photo mode or a mod or something to see that, and so that picture got on the internet and people were reporting that, which is not particularly that odd, frankly. Like, and in a certain level, it's not. What are you going to do? Either you make it completely smooth like Barbie, or you put blackness there in the 3D models, because there needs to be some color there in the 3D model. And if you put blackness there, it's still going to look like a dark areola. So you would have to go just skin tone color Barbie in your design, and clearly the artist didn't do that. And see, all of that is fairly legitimate news worth being reported upon, but Sony is trying to DMCA it out of existence off the internet, and succeeding at a certain level. Like, it definitely is not getting talked about by Gematsu or Video Games Chronicles or GameDeveloper.com. Those articles, none of those sites took up that article in the first place. Either they didn't hear about it or they didn't care. And now Sony has moved its censorship not only from active actively in its own games to trying to censor the entire internet. And the site I saw it on actually did take down the photos because of a DMCA lawsuit threat, but if anybody had the money to fight Sony would clearly lose, and shouldn't have taken it down, because DMCA's, particularly in this case, against a news reporting site, would not stand, or shouldn't stand for sure, but wouldn't stand. And at a certain point, the DMCA and copyright really shows itself to be a way to control news and control people way more than a way to protect the actual value of a copyrighted product. In fact, I have not heard a story where DMCA was used in what I would consider a legitimate way to stop somebody from making like a off-brand Mickey Mouse character or something like that, just making absolute garbage. Like I just haven't seen the DMCA used that way, I think, since it's been established. It probably has been used that way, but every story that makes it to the news seems to be, there are way more DMCA abuses than legitimate implementations of it. I don't know if it's particularly video game news, but apparently there's also this hubbub about somebody doing a very ridiculous, probably illegal giveaway of computers to people, but to be qualified to be able to get to win the PC, they were rejecting people and changing the rules quite a bit. So they would do like a random drawing amongst people who had stupidly become ambassadors for this other site. And to be an ambassador means you're pretty much advertising for free to this other site. And then they were rejecting, like, not just like the first person, they rejected basically 8 or 9 people until they finally found somebody who they felt was worthy enough to actually give this PC to, which, yeah, that's highly illegal and highly stupid too, because it just showed them to be incredibly childish and flippant and just not even understanding the risks and dangers you take upon doing a giveaway. That's why most people do giveaways through other services that can standardize it and solve that. Solve any legal issues or help you avoid any legal issues. I definitely personally miss the days in which it felt like you could actually win giveaways and contests. Nowadays, you really can't. Or you have to be particularly entering a lot of contests, or a lot of contests that very few people are entering. Because there's just so many people that can enter online, and 10,000 to 100,000 entries can happen in an hour. Alright, let's continue with the news and try and wrap up here. We already talked about the Ghostwire Tokyo Prelude visual novel. It apparently also launches March 8th on PC. Like, I definitely don't want to see a precedent where we start to see a whole bunch of visual novels coming out to do all the story and set up for games because the game itself is unfinished. That's my fear, certainly. Toei Productions has acquired Toei Games. I assume that's how they're pronounced. These are Indonesian developers, so I could be mispronouncing both names pretty awfully. Which I definitely would, off the top of my head, question how many Indonesian companies really could exist without merging and becoming one big Indonesian company. Famitsu has the review scores. Elix gets 29 out of 40. Sifu 35 out of 40. That's pretty high. Soul Crusted 33 out of 40. And then Triangle Strategy 35 out of 40. That's pretty high also. Netflix is going to acquire Next Games. This is the developer of Stranger Things, Puzzle Tales, and more. So they already had worked with them a little bit. That being said, I still don't think there really seems to be a path or an idea here as far as what Netflix is going to do if it's going to try and get into the games market. I think it's probably a mistake for Netflix to get in the games market because they should just focus on making more video content that's actually good. I don't want Netflix to become the next Amazon.com, where all of a sudden your Netflix subscription is shipping you books and clothes and electronics, and boy, more realistically, in the short term, Netflix becomes this app that installs games on your phone, also as an Amazon marketplace or Google Play Store, which that seems to be about all they're kind of thinking about doing, is either trying to have interactive games on the Netflix interface mixed in with your videos, or they're trying to have it be its own separate thing as an app store. But it definitely feels like they're making things closer to mobile games than thinking about making a big MMO or a big AAA console game. Which, honestly, if they were going to acquire games companies, having some AAA games built around some of their first-party original IPs might make some sense, but I don't know how many of Netflix's content is actually even original IPs. You could make a Stranger Things game, and they did, but after Stranger Things, I don't know what else you make. Like, there's maybe a couple other shows that would justify that. Oh, I will say, speaking of Netflix, Archive 81, I did enjoy it, but don't bother watching it. It ends on a cliffhanger at the first season. So wait until the next season, I would say. Well, otherwise you're going to be stuck on a cliffhanger. And maybe it won't ever get a second season, so that may just be where the story ends. And I definitely have had that as a problem, as I've watched several things and they've just ended on a cliffhanger. I watched that kids horror movie, Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, and that ended on a cliffhanger, and I'm not sure that there will be any more. Alright, so I guess you want to just pick level 4 here. I don't know if that worked well or not. I feel like this may be a Exodia deck. But there's plenty of decks where you just try and draw for a specific card. Moving on, The Legend of Heroes Trails from Zero launches September 27th in North America and September 30th in Europe. It just feels like this may be either yet another Legends of Heroes game, or this might be maybe a spin-off of the Legends of Heroes games. Yeah, because it feels a little bit more mobile-y than I think the other Legends or Trails games have been. And I'm probably confusing Trails with Tales for some other games. But yeah, visually that doesn't look particularly interesting, nor have I decided to play any of those long-running JRPG style games. We already talked about this, but there's some new screenshots. Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil 3, and Resident Evil 7 coming to the PS5 and Xbox Series in 2022. This is a fairly dark, fairly blurry image. And I don't have a blur on the static images. I suppose that may just be a level of grain on the images, or these don't really pop though. Like this feels really blurry. Maybe it's blown up because of my zoom out, but it really doesn't seem like the visuals you'd want to show. Special summon this. Take that. Take that. Put that there. Activate that. Try that. Put the other one on this, might as well. See if this works for us. Let's see. Other Side Entertainment, not a company I recognize, has announced the development of a new title led by Warren Spector. Jeff Godsill has been appointed the Other Side Entertainment general manager. This does look like a pretty weird looking concept of flying whales. I guess this is a flying turtle making the earth. Okay, well, not a lot to really say there other than to point out the news. So we should just move forward. And then we had already talked about Epic Games to acquire Bandcamp. And then Sifu sales have topped 1 million according to Komatsu, which Sifu definitely feels like it is doing a lot better than I kind of expected, because I really wasn't expecting too much from it. I really thought it would be too much of a niche game, just not something that would catch people's attention, and so I just didn't think that many people would buy it. I guess it's more than likely benefiting from it being incredibly slow at the moment, and there just not being that many video games coming out in the first place. Moving on, we have VHS Platform 2D, which obviously is going to be a no. And we have Pixel Trouble, which is obviously going to be a no. And this time, let's, I guess, just stick with 4. Although this was a 3. I was wondering if he possibly has a bunch of 4s or 3s. Oh, that's a 1. Here we have a game called Yum Collector, which is just a match 3 game. So obviously no. Blastercitos is nothing. Miami Sunset Drive is an infinite driver, side-scrolling. So I don't see anything special there. Also fairly expensive, some of these games. Elect Dude looks like nothing. You know what we're not seeing is a lot of Chinese and Russian games. So maybe we will start to see that the Chinese / English and Chinese, English and Russian games. We may just stop to seeing as many of those. 15 crystals. One more and I get to tier silver 3. It may take a month to get back up to where we were. And we have this like dual and solo mode, which I don't even want to do. See, that's kind of a shame because you can't re-roll things. The only solo mode that I haven't finished, and I'm not sure I mentioned this at all, is the newest one they just added. So, yeah. It would be a choice of either doing something we have already done or doing the new solo mode stuff, and I just don't want to do that. Also, I spent 1,000 gems opening 10 packs in the last stream, and I'm sort of regretting it because it's with the daily quests and all. It takes probably a week or so to get 1,000 gems. I think we'll just leave that here and finish the rest of these games and these news. Instruments of Destruction here looks like you're building cars in the destruction physics idea. It kind of has a bit of a vibe of like Blast Corps as an idea, and maybe this is the way something like Blast Corps would make sense, is that you have to build your own cars. It's early access. I'm gonna give it a follow. That's being pretty generous, but might be something to that. Skiing VR is not a terrible thought. It's like it's got some silliness but I guess Ski Free is kind of silly too. $18.99 might be a little too expensive. English and Chinese there. I'm gonna put that on the fall list though. Here we have a game called Bad Cat, which is supposed to be some kind of puzzle game, but I just don't see a game here. Feels like it's maybe a stealth game where you have to run around and not be caught from room to room. But it doesn't even feel like there's a way you could do that, because it seems like you would have to hide quite a bit, or you'd have to have more paths. And the cat breaks something, and then that creates a puzzle movement that then convinces something, there might be a game here. Let's see, here we have a dating sim. Our battle's just begun, episode 2. This one not being particularly tagged as having adult content on it, even though there's definitely some skin being shown. I feel like our battle's just begun 1 just came out though. Well, the page isn't going anywhere. Yeah, let's just leave that where that is and see if that loads later. Meanwhile, we have Arena 3D. It's also not loading. But it's not like I'm having network drop frames or anything. So it feels like Steam itself may be having trouble. Now, it wouldn't be surprising. I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see fairly large DDoSs against big services. Blocker dropper here looks like nothing. And all of a sudden, these live streams may have to be rethought or just handled differently as all of a sudden a bunch of pages just don't load and the browsing the internet becomes kind of a nightmare. This feels like this is supposed to be a Myst clone. It looks pretty rough though, and it's a free game. So instead of putting it on the follow list, I'll just say, if you want to play this game, play this game. It's free. Wrath of Ananias. Next, Millennia here. Looks like it's a platformer of no interest. ITRP, Volatile Vertex. I think that's misspelled. Vertex. It's supposed to be Vortex, VORTX. It looks like nothing. English, Russian, Spain, Spanish. But we may start to see this where anything that supports Russian all of a sudden claims to support another language on top of English, in some hope that maybe people would buy their garbage game then. Of course, if they were gonna lie, they could have been lying the whole time. This Horde Core. Don't like the visuals on this, actually. It kind of feels like there might be the beginnings of an idea of a game where you just get a larger and larger horde of people fighting against zombies. But I don't like the visuals. Maybe I'm being a little too flippant about that, though. So I'm gonna be cautious and put it on the follow list. I suppose I have always been fairly flippant about visuals. If something just looks ugly, I don't want to play it, and I should stick to that strategy because it's worked fairly well. This one, Tempest, looks like it might be something of a puzzle VR game, maybe, but it could also be nothing. Zombie Rollers Pinball Heroes. Well, I definitely am a sucker for pinball games, so we'll put that on this. What's funny is this is being published by Daedalic Entertainment, and I believe Daedalic Entertainment just got acquired. So maybe they're putting this out really quickly, or maybe they're putting this out because of that new acquisition. Deliver Us from Evil. Looks like it's just a generic Visual novel, not particularly well animated. It also kind of feels like it's all over the place. You're in a castle, you're in a casino, you're in like medieval times, you're seeing an angel. It's free with some kind of DLC. It's English, allegedly full audio. I would question if that's true. Next we have Quasimorphosis Exordium, which looks like nothing. We have Soul in the Chamber, which again, oddly religious themed for a game that does not look particularly good. It'd be weird if all of a sudden we started to see a whole bunch of like religious themed games out of the blue. Trapped in Stone, World War II horror. Looks like an asset flip horror game. Particularly bad looking one at that. Zombie City. Looks like an asset flip first person shooter. Which also requires VR, but is selling at 59 cents, which is way too cheap. Club Soccer Director. Looks like nothing of interest to me. Free to play. Leave No One Behind. Aya Drung. I don't think I see anything here of particular interest. Either it looks like it's a real-time strategy game set in Vietnam. I don't know if anybody really wants to play any Vietnam games. Zadel Princess is, by all assumptions, an RPG Maker game. So new to that. The Chronos Principle looks like a single screen puzzle game. Might consider it, but only if a lot of people like it. And then Buccaneers, The New Age of Piracy. Looks like it's a low polygon open world pirate game. It's a single player. Free to play single player, no in-app purchases. Well, I guess again, that means check it out if you're interested. I'm going to put it on the fall list because it's a VR game, and only because it's a VR game. And yeah, our battle has just begun. Episode 1, when this finally did load, came out July 14th. And it didn't even make it to the fall list, so either I took it off the fall list or what. But clearly, if the first one didn't make it to the fall list, I don't need to put the second one on the fall list. GameDeveloper.com has an obituary here for the Nexon founder Kim Yong-ju, dying at age 54, who is the founder of the free-to-play giant Nexon. Fairly young. Korean company spokesman. So it'll be apparently he'd been receiving treatment for depression, and that it seemed to have worsened recently, so there's an assumption here he killed himself, but you never know, it might be just a Korean mob too. Yeah, one would assume that Nexon will be fine as a company, but it might be very possible that isn't exactly the case, and they didn't have a plan in place, particularly for such a young CEO. We had already pretty much talked about Republic's developer Camouflage opening a new studio in Japan. They're saying that opening this new studio will help it create, quote, meaningful games. like Valve is saying that the Steam Deck stick drift was caused by a dead zone regression bug. I don't know what regression bug means. My fear is that any software dead zone fix is going to just potentially constantly try to add a larger and larger dead zone, and regression, I guess, would be the opposite of that, where maybe they've got some software in there which is trying to make a smaller and smaller dead zone on top of that, which would be nice, but there's really not a great way to measure that either. And you could certainly waste a lot of battery life if you were running a program in the background just constantly measuring where the analog sticks were when somebody isn't actually using the analog sticks and touching it. We had already talked about the Vice Prime Minister asking Sony, Microsoft, and other studios to halt operations in Russia. Ubisoft has provided Ukraine employees with alternate housing and establishes support hotlines, which it probably kills GameDeveloper.com to have to say anything nice about Ubisoft after probably about 2 years, if not longer, of putting article after article attacking Ubisoft kind of unfairly. But also, I wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't even cross GameDeveloper.com's editors' minds, because I wouldn't be surprised if the kind of slacktivist social justice warriors that work in video game websites like GameDeveloper.com can't even remember who they hate when they move on to the next person that they're attacking and hating. It probably is incredibly flippant like that. Here is an article that I have to take as not really being news. Valve says it is currently working on multiple projects. It also said the exact same thing 3 or 4 years ago. It's more than likely the exact same projects, and at no point does that mean any of them are actually going to come out. Now, in all fairness, yes, we do occasionally get a tech demo, and we did get Half-Life Alyx, which was a little bit more than a tech demo. It was a full VR game. But I also wouldn't be surprised if you just said Left 4 Dead 3, Half-Life 3, Counter-Strike Go, 2 or 3, I don't know where they are even with the numbering on that, Portal 3, that would be 5 projects that will always be actively in development, even though nobody is actually working on it and there's no chance of them actually coming out. And so you could easily say multiple games are being worked on without any real hope of it ever being published or coming out. We had already talked about Netflix buying the Finnish studio Next Games for $72 million. The $72 million part is new info. And we definitely talked about Epic Games acquiring Bandcamp. And that just leaves us with a fall list here. Pets VR needs more time. Fall list cleanup. Pets No More is mixed, so he can leave the fall list. Peter's Adventure Learn English. See, I think this was a game that was in Spanish, and you were supposed to learn English just by playing the game. But at $20, I don't buy that it actually would be educational, and yeah. It's trying to be a child's game at $20. It can't get any, it doesn't even have any relevancy. So it's gotta go. Basically, any young kid could learn English playing any game with any text in it. So selling your game specifically as an educational game and then really not doing anything special to make it an educational game is dishonest. Perspective Paradise here is very positive. This is a VR game for free. Although I don't know if you really want to see the hydrogen bomb being exploded at this point. Persona 5 Strikers, I guess, is very positive, so I'll put that on the wish list. Although in all fairness, this would be a game that somebody would have to gift me because, yeah. Oh, it's actually Atlas that's the developer. That's not NIS. I was wrong. Yeah, the fighting game, Persona 5 Strikers. I think this is a fighting game. Maybe it isn't. I don't think this is the Persona I'd want to play first. Although it might make a lot of sense just to play one of the newest ones. This came out in February of 2021. And just skip the older ones. Perfect Tides. Looks like a point and click adventure game and it needs more time. I just put that on the fall list. Peepo needs more time. This one, Peepo, some kind of bowling game it's supposed to be. Yeah, unfortunately it just doesn't have any relevancy. It's a VR game. And a bowling, like a bowling VR game, not a terrible thought for the silliness that's happening here, but yeah, I think this gets broken as an idea if you just get the new Switch sports game instead. It's not a terrible thought though. It feels like it's a Samba de Amigo inspired thing. You bowl, and when you knock the things down, it's kind of like you get a piñata and you get a stick, and you can swing the piñata for rewards. It's not a terrible thought. That being said, I'm still going to remove it, which may be a step in the right direction to finally getting rid of the fall list VR games in general, and just realizing that I'm more than likely never going to buy a VR headset anyways. This Pinko Park seems like it is a Pokemon Snap clone, and it's rated very positively. So I'll put that on the wish list. And then Pendulum Swing, the complete journey needs... I'm going to give it a little bit more time, but I'm probably going to just have to decide to put it on the wish list. Honestly, I should just put it on the wish list. It's not really at that 30 reviews, but it's at 85% positive. Close enough. And then Peg Solitaire. Yep. I'm keeping this on the fall list until I can find something that's a better Peg Solitaire game. Obviously, I wouldn't want to play this. Tabletop Simulator very possibly can do this, and I just haven't looked at Tabletop Simulator yet to know. Alright, and so we have barely gone 3 hours, which I am just going to scroll down my Twitter feed and see if there's any new news for this Wednesday stream to talk about, and then we'll be done. Yep. Ever since I've stopped playing Fallout 3, I've kind of stopped getting the crick in my neck, but that very easily just means I haven't sat in a chair for 3 hours straight. It still definitely feels a little sore, and right now my cushions have gone flat, and I hope I don't start to run into that as a problem. But I've been also leaning back for 3 hours straight and should have adjusted and leaned forward. Yeah, with this recliner, it's real easy to make the chair go forward to force me to lean forward in a way that a regular this is a lift chair recliner, so for like old people, and that's something you can't do in a regular just like office chair recliner. You can only lean back in those cases. I'm not expecting too much new news to happen anytime over the next few months. I imagine it's all going to be fairly boring. There is definitely some computer components that come out of Ukraine and come out of Russia as the main suppliers. So it probably is a long way away, but it's not unbelievable that a year from now, 2 years from now, some of the people, apparently Jacksepticeye has 15 billion views, and YouTube Gaming congratulated him. YouTube themselves seemingly not. But yeah, Russia, I think, is the main supplier of like neon gas around the world. That neon gas is needed to make the high-powered lasers, to make wafers and chips. And Ukraine, I think, was a supplier of one of the heavy metals used in transistors. Which at a certain point, it does kind of point out that to make the computer components we have, there's a lot of resources that are not abundant around the world, and there has been this world trade concept of not trying to find mines for other sources, and because it's just cheaper to buy all of your supplies from a third world country. Most often it was a case of having slave labor mine heavy metals in China or in Africa or Middle East, where some of these resources may actually exist if we were bothering to even look for them or survey them inside of the United States, inside of Europe, UK, but people are not motivated to even look for those kinds of resources or start mines instead. Apparently Kotaku is trying to unionize GMG Union. It seems like that's what's happening. I don't have a real story there to confirm it, though. Although, frankly, Kotaku trying to unionize at this point is far too little too late, because I don't think the people that work at Kotaku are strong enough or important enough. And I wouldn't be surprised if every single person trying to unionize at Kotaku got fired, and the few people that still go to Kotaku not caring or even noticing that they had been replaced. Like to make a union and unionize, you need it either to be very talent strong and high in demand, so that the general people want the specific writers that are at Kotaku, which I don't believe is the case, or you need to be very people strong, in the sense that there would be lots and lots of employees and writers at Kotaku, and I don't think that's the case either. It's long since been the first step of union busting, has always been to have contract writers and independent contractors write for video game sites, and that's definitely what Giant Bomb, when it got acquired, started pushing towards, is having more independent contractors and less people on staff. Alright, well, that's going to be it for this stream. There really was no other new news. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want a friend to follow me on any social media sites, there's a whole bunch of links down below. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.